Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. It's an interlull, of course. Some of our players are away on international duty. We'll be keeping all of our fingers and toes and anything you can cross it. Because it is being said that once we come back from this interlull, we might have some of our injured players back in the group, back in the squad and ready to contribute. So the last thing we need is for that to be offset by some international duty injury. So I'm keeping everything crossed. Anyway, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. On today's show, we're going to be doing some statements. If you don't know what that is, I will explain that to you in a couple of moments' time. But before we do that, just one last call, please. We need your votes. Arseblog has been nominated for Best Fan Media, Best Fran Merida, at the FSA Awards, the Football Supporters Association Awards 2025. The deadline for voting is this weekend, I think. So this is my last chance to ask you if you had the time or the inclination to give us your vote. It would be very, very much appreciated by me and all the Arseblog team. We're up against some very high quality opposition. The Anfield Rap are in there. Our friend Dan from HLTCO is in there and a few others besides. So it is very stiff competition. So we need your votes. If you could do that, that would be great. You will find a link to the voting form. It's in the show notes right now. You can find that, click it, give us your votes. And we thank you very much indeed in advance for that. There's also some other Arsenal votes that you can do. Declan Rice is up for Men's Player of the Year. The other nominees are Semenyo, Holland, Mateta, Caicedo and Gravenberch. So come on, let's help Dec get the gong there. And Women's Player of the Year, Alessia Russo and Mariona Caldente up for that one. So you can do some other Arsenal voting as well, tactical Arsenal voting. Like I said, the link is in the show notes, and I think you have until Sunday to do that. So again, thanks very much indeed. Right, let's get on with today's show and let's bombard this man with some statements from the Stadio podcast. It is Ryan Hunn. Ryan, good morning to you.
Morning, Andrew. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks, man. Good to chat to you.
You too. Today we're going to do some statements, which you know all about. But if this is somebody's first time listening to one of these podcasts, the drill is I solicited some statements from our wonderful Patreon members. And I'm going to put those statements to you, and you either have to strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree with those particular statements. So no middle ground, no sitting on the fence. I've got some interesting ones. I've got some easy ones. I've got a few which, are a little bit out there, but might provoke a little bit of discussion. So we're good to go. If you're ready to go, I think we have a relatively easy one to kick us off.
Okay.
Ready. This one comes from Solo. Don't know if it's Han Solo or just a distant relative. Anyway, they say, after an extremely impressive run, the draw with Sunderland was actually a well-timed reality check needed so the squad doesn't get complacent and drop points to actual rivals.
I would say agree, and the reason that I would say agree is that I don't think that result comes out of context for the players. I think the players knew that they were hanging on a little bit, they were struggling physically, and they just needed to get to the international break. We were talking about this on Stadio, actually, about how last weekend felt very much like a lot of teams were just like, let's just get this one out of the way and get a few players back. So I think the players will be fully aware of that. I think in terms of a well-timed reality check, I'm not sure I agree fully with the phrasing necessarily, but I agree with the idea of that, hey, you can't, like, this is how tiny the margins are. Maybe the specifically the well-timed reality check was the equalizer, I'd say.
Right.
Because that felt like something that hasn't really happened to us much this season.
Sure.
So I'd say agree, because I do think that there were elements of the game where Arteta afterwards can be like, look, this is going to happen if we're remotely off our game. And Sunderland are a good side, and I think Arsenal are going to, with the games that have been moved, like the Everton game, for example, I think that they'll be able to take elements from this game and apply it to other games this season. So yeah, agree.
Okay. Do you think it's more of a reality check for the players or for the manager? Because where do you stand on this discussion that listen, we were 74 minutes, whenever it was, when Leandro Trossard scored the goal. We'd played very well in that second half. But maybe there was a call for some extra legs. Do you destabilise a back four? Because most of the subs we had available to us were kind of defensive subs, right? So we had Ben White, we had Nketiah, and we had Mosquera, and we had Christian Norgard. You know, is there the balance between adding fresh legs, which might give you a bit more impetus in the game? That, you know, I don't think it has to completely change your approach. If you want to see it out, go see it out because you're a defensively strong team, versus the idea that if you do make changes late on, like, there's a reason why managers typically don't tend to make a lot of changes in their back four in the final stages of games. They will add to their defense, but not necessarily take players away. But do you think there's maybe something for Arteta to think about when he's got Lewis Skelly and Nketiah and Ben White, where, okay, you can keep the spine of your defence with Saliba and Gabriel, but you can add some more on the flanks?
Yeah, or even just in front. Maybe the reality check is for Arteta in the sense that the reality is that this isn't last season or the season before or the season before that now. This squad is pretty mega, even with all of the injuries. And there's been a lot of discussion about, I read your blog this morning about, you know, for example, Miles and Ethan's playing time. However, the great thing about this season compared to this time last season, or even January, February last season, is that those two are more than able to come on in big games like that and add something, even if you are protecting a lead. Miles, for example, in terms of his ball carrying and progressive passing, I think, and his defensive nous for someone so young. He's not like occasionally he does get caught, but I think if he's coming on to as almost like an extra line in front of the stable back four, that's a real asset. So maybe the reality check for Arteta is I don't need to worry so much about maybe I don't need to worry about as much as I used to worry about because we're actually really, really good. And I think that a few more proactive changes, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if I've used the right word there, but less changes that would invite less pressure on your back four and actually just keep keep everything a little bit further up the pitch. I mean, that's maybe the reality check, I think. Because I think we're more than capable of doing that this season, more so than other years. So yeah, you look at the amount of goals we've conceded or having conceded, whichever way you want to frame that, and it tells you that defensively we're a really, really strong outfit. What about this one then from Bergkamp's Pixels? And he says, smaller clubs. He didn't put in inverted commas smaller clubs, but I'm going to say in inverted commas smaller clubs because I think it's worth making that distinction, right? So in inverted commas, smaller clubs raise their game against Arsenal more often than they do against any of the other so-called big six. So we have a so-called big six, but in inverted commas, smaller clubs. I disagree with that, I think.
Do you think that's a question of...
I don't think it's any different.
Yeah, do you think it's a question of perception? Because, you know, we only really experience those games as Arsenal fans, whereas, like, I'm not really watching Sunderland versus Man City too often or, you know, Burnley versus Liverpool, those kinds of things. I mean... Well,
that's a good example.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, because...
Burnley raised the game very much for Liverpool and were, you know, a little unlucky, I think, with that result. I think that there's probably not necessarily raising the level or whatever. I think there has been historically a bit of an undercurrent that Arsenal can be got at or rattled. So I think maybe there's been an element of that. Whereas I think, for example, if you look over the last decade, Man City have felt at points so invincible that there is a little bit of... we see it quite a lot in the Bundesliga, for example. Like sometimes some teams, depending on when they play Bayern, they're just like...
yeah, we're fucked.
Yeah, we're like, let's just worry about next week. Obviously, they don't. And a lot of teams do, you know... The teams who really go at Bayern sometimes pick up points. But, you know, Union did it this weekend, for example. But I think that sometimes people have maybe thought that Arsenal, you could probably get something from an Arsenal game that you might not have been able to get from a Man City game. I think that's different now. And I do think that using the Sunderland game as an example, I just think that's how Sunderland play, and they've done very well this season, and they are a good team. I think they're they're a better team than we're used to seeing at this point from a newly promoted side, I think.
Agree, yeah.
And that I don't think that result is going to age terribly, personally. It reminds me a little bit. It's different because I think the response to it has been very different. But it reminds me in terms of a result that will probably age not very badly, like the Brentford away defeat, the 2-0 that time. Because, you know, Brentford were new in the league. Everyone was a bit like, oh my God, how could this happen? But you've seen how, you know, Brentford have established themselves as a Premier League side now. So I'm expecting Sunderland to do similar or potentially worse to a few other big teams this season.
There is a really interesting sort of discussion maybe to be had about the way Sunderland have approached the Premier League, having been out of it for whatever it was, 9 years. Listen, they spent a load of money, right?
Yeah.
A load of money. So that obviously plays into it. You look at, God, I'm just trying to do a quick ad here. I mean, it's in the region of £140 million, something thereabouts for a newly promoted team. That's a lot of money, and they brought in experience and they brought in some good players, but they brought in players who allow them to play this way. Like I made this point to James on the Arsecast Extra on Monday. Like with half an hour to go, they swapped out their entire front three.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you know, you then have fresh legs against tiring legs. As great as these Arsenal defenders are, if you're playing 90 minutes against guys who are only playing 30 minutes, chances are they've got a bit more zip in the final few minutes of a game than you might, right? That's just normal. But I do think it is interesting the way that they have approached it, that there is a sort of reward for, okay, we're not going to come up and sit back. And I can see the logic in that, by the way. You know, for a team like Burnley, okay, we are limited on resources. There are ways and means that we can play certain games in the Premier League. But I think the way Sunderland have tried to play this season, both physically and with the ball. I mean, they beat Chelsea a couple of weeks before they beat us, by the way, at Stamford Bridge.
Yeah.
You know, it's not really a flash in the pan. So I know it's not something that all promoted sides can do, but it does demonstrate maybe there is a different way of doing it, particularly after a couple of seasons where the three promoted teams are the ones that usually go back down or have been thereabouts, you know, in the relegation zone the entire time. And I think maybe it's too early to say it. Maybe we'll end up with egg on our face, but I don't see Sunderland getting pulled into a relegation fight.
Yeah, and if they do, then it will be because maybe just the Premier League is a little bit chaotic in general. I referred to it on Stadio the other day as there's, you know, in F1 terms, it feels like everything from third or fourth down 10 places is like a DRS train. Do you know what I mean? It's just everyone's just kind of following each other and no one's really getting into position. But I think from a Sunderland point of view, in the money aspect, I think this is just something that we're going to have to get more used to with the Premier League. In that a newly promoted side now, because of the amount of money that is involved within the Premier League, and it's hard to overstate, I think, the gap between the Premier League and everyone else. You know, a newly promoted side like Sunderland can make two signings from Ajax. They can sign someone from PSG. They can sign someone from RB Leipzig.
Bayer Leverkusen.
You know, Granit Xhaka, who won an unbeaten double a couple of years ago at Leverkusen. They can make these signings because, A, that they know that they're going to be kind of set for money for this year, which is you can gamble a little bit more. And especially when you add into that a sale of someone like Joe Bellingham for 20 odd million quid. But also players are just happier to, like, I think compared to a decade ago, players are more willing to leave clubs like Ajax or PSG or Leverkusen and go to a newly promoted club in the Premier League because they know that if they do one good season there and the club doesn't stay up, they'll get another move in the Premier League. So it's just it's quite a new phenomenon, I think, in terms of something that's been a little bit more accelerated over the last few years. And I think Forest did Forest looked, they didn't do an amazing job of it, but they tried that approach. They just
bought everyone,
as many
people
as possible. There's huge squad turnover at Forest. And I do think that was one of the reasons why they managed to stay up initially, because the quality of players they signed was so good. I think Sunderland now, they've not only signed a huge amount of really good players, they've signed them with a plan. They're not just random signings. And I think that the the thing that you mentioned about the ability to switch out that front line supports that argument. You know, they can. It's not just random players. There's definitely some thinking there.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I think it's a sensible. I mean, it's hard to say that, like, oh, you come up and you spend 100 million quid or something. It's really sensible. But I think in terms of with the financial security that the Premier League gives you now, it is fairly sensible because you need to stay in the league.
Well, yeah, if you spend that 100 million well, I mean, you could spend it all on one player these days, or you might not get much change out of 100 million. You know, it sounds like a lot of money. It's funny, yeah. You look at the clubs that they brought players in from this summer: Chelsea, Leipzig, Atletico Madrid, Ajax, PSG, Leverkusen, Brighton, Roma. You know. Anyway, enough Sunderland. What about this one? This one comes from, okay, I'm going to do my best, Srikanth Ravishankar, who says Arsenal's top 3 scorers this season will be Gyökeres, Trossard and Saka in that order.
I mean, there are top 3 goal scorers at the moment, right?
Yes. So Gyökeres, Trossard, Saka in that order.
I'm going to say disagree.
I thought you might.
I am not 100% sure that will be the top 3 goal scorers. And if they are, I think Saka will be the top goal scorer out of that 3. Okay,
I that was my thinking on the number 1 goal scorer. I think it will be Saka. I'm sort of hard pressed at this point, though, to see who else breaks into that top 3. I know we're all waiting the return of Kai Havertz, Mikel Merino. Who knows what he can do? Gabriel Martinelli. You know, who do you see as another realistic entrance into that top 3?
I think Kai Havertz will end up playing a lot of games when he's back, and I think he will pick up 4 goals fairly quickly. I think there will also be periods where Gyökeres isn't starting games, especially when Havertz comes back. But yeah, apart from Gabriel Magalhaes, who might break into that, maybe he's going to be our top goal scorer.
I don't think so.
We never know. No, I think it will. I think Kai Havertz is the only player that I see breaking into that. Because I know Martinelli. I think Martinelli has
4 goals.
Yeah, but he's got more goals per 90 minutes played, I think, than anyone else in our squad. But I think that's also down to when he's been introduced. I think Martinelli is really going to thrive in a lot of games this season coming off the bench, and therefore his goal scoring ratio might look really good. I don't think he's going to play enough minutes compared to anyone else to be the top goal scorer. He might be top 3, but I can't see it personally because I think that Trossard is still going to play more than Martinelli.
Sure.
What do you think?
I think it's quite a bit for Kai Havertz to make up. I know it's only 4 goals on Trossard, right? But I think you're right. Trossard will keep scoring. I think the end product we're getting from him at the moment is excellent. Gyökeres with 6, Saka with 6. Like, I agree with you that we are going to timeshare that centre forward position quite a bit. You know, there's going to be games when Havertz starts and games when Gyökeres starts, and I think they're going to have to sort of get used to that. But I think it's a really sensible approach. Because, you know, as we've seen, we lost Havertz on the opening day of the season. We lost Gyökeres. It's maybe too simplistic to say that ultimately the Gyökeres injury was a consequence of that Havertz injury. But I think in that period, he's played more than Mikel Arteta and the coaching staff would have wanted to play because they would have wanted to share those minutes. Slightly ironic, of course, that he picked up that muscular injury after having a midweek off where he didn't play at all. But there you go. That's football for you. I just think it's a bit much for Havertz to make up that. I hope he does. If he does, then, you know, we're going to be in really good shape if he can catch Trossard when he returns and overtake him in the goal scoring list, I'll be very happy, because I think that means he's going to be scoring a lot of goals and scoring a lot of goals frequently. So I would say I would go for Saka, Gyökeres and Trossard as the top three in that order.
I think my three at the end of the season will be Saka, Gyökeres, Havertz.
Okay. We will see. What about this one? This is related to that. It comes from Joseph O'Brien, and he says, Gyökeres and Havertz will frequently start as two strikers together. And there's an addendum to that, with Martin Odegaard losing his starting spot to accommodate this.
Strongly disagree, I think.
Oh, okay.
Because unless... I mean, if Havertz and Gyökeres are going to start as two strikers, then that's a shift in formation.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this unit works so well in this configuration that I can't see Arteta, for example, all of a sudden being like, right, we're going two big guys up top kind of thing.
Mm.
I think there will be ends of games where it looks like they are playing together up top together, especially if Arsenal are chasing games. I don't expect Arsenal to line up in a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-2-2, sure, for example. And I can't see Martin Odegaard losing out completely, because I think I think that is the thing that is probably keeping Mikel Arteta awake at night more. It's just not having him around, because I think he does so much in a tangible sense for Arsenal, but I think also in an intangible sense, having him fit and available and on the pitch, I think is something Mikel Arteta has consistently suggested that he needs and he loves with Martin Odegaard. So I think I can't imagine him all of a sudden just taking Martin Odegaard out and being like, right, we're going to... These two guys who we have been wanting to rotate and switch between all season, and both of them have been injured, we're now going to actually just chuck them both in at the same time. I love the idea in theory, but I don't think it's going to happen.
I get where the statement is coming from. I think there are going to be times where we finish with both of them on the pitch. Absolutely. And I think if we do start with Kai Havertz and Victor Gyökeres in a game, it won't be with two up front. It'll be Kai Havertz playing behind, maybe not quite the Bergkamp to Thierry Henry role, but certainly a little off the centre forward. As for the Odegaard thing, I just don't think there's any way he loses his place to a formation which feels a little bit retro. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course, but it doesn't really feel like the way Mikel Arteta operates. And I think you could widen that out and say, if we have a Martin Odegaard on the pitch at Sunderland, do we sit that deep? No. Do we retreat the way that we did? Because I think he is really, really fundamental in organising that team on the pitch and getting it to play higher up the pitch, leading the press. That Odegaard, Havertz, that's it as well. I mean, there's the creativity, and we need him to score goals and create goals and all of those things. But I just think on the pitch, he would be somebody who would push that team higher up, or at least get us a little bit more organised, because I think maybe there was a touch of disorganisation when it came to that Sunderland equaliser. I mean, listen, if we're in a game where we need a goal and it's late, two big men up front, absolutely. And do we have them?
With Arsenal, sorry to cut in, but I think especially with the set piece aspect of it, I think
of course,
that's the thing. I think starting games like that, I can't see it, but definitely finishing games, unless Mikel Arteta does what many suspect and actually completes his Moyesian arc and, goes fully into, right, Arsenal just playing 4-4-2 now. It's actually just going to, like, Zubimendi and Declan Rice's touches per 90 is just going to fall off a cliff because the Arsenal are just going to lump it. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's what the Premier League is crying out for at the moment.
I'm not sure about that.
Me neither. If that happens, I'm out.
All right. Well, listen, here's one that's sort of related to that very vaguely. Christopher Campbell says, The long throw is here to stay. It is not a passing fad.
I'm going to say disagree, because I think that it will inevitably become less effective than it has been for teams. I think I would love to strongly disagree, because I'm kind of over it. I'm not going to lie.
Does it I don't know, offend your purist football sensibilities?
It doesn't offend me, because I think that at the end of the day, I'm not watching YouTube highlight videos of some of my favorite teams of all time. I'm watching the most elite level of a particular sport, where, you know, we talked about the finances before. You're talking about the most well-funded league in the world, and the margins to get advantages over other teams is just becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. I don't love, like, aesthetically or just from a purely enjoyment factor, I don't like the long throws thing.
Is that PTSD? Is that sort of Tony Pulis-Stoke informed trauma?
No, not even really. It's just like, I'm just like, I think there are other ways, and I actually can see this coming back, where you see evolutions in football, I think, quite often come from a change in the rhythm of the game as well. And for example, one of the things that made that amazing Pep Guardiola Barcelona side so scary was that they were always moving the ball, and the ball was always in play, and you were just never getting near it. And I think that just that psychological, like, warfare, for want of a better term. You know, I talk to Moose about this all the time, who, for those who don't know, is a Manchester United fan, my co-host on Stadio. And we talk about that Champions League final, and it was just like, you know, just the thing is that when you got the ball back, it was almost worse, because you knew it wasn't going to last long. So I personally think that there will be an evolution where a side like Arsenal, who doesn't get enough credit for its actual technical ability and how good it is moving the ball around, because people focus on the set pieces and seem to think Arsenal are just a completely direct team, in quotation marks. I think, if anything, the technical ability of this Arsenal side is massively underrated because of that narrative. I think that Arsenal might end up speeding the game up a bit eventually, and actually, when people are getting set for long throws, you might see. I mean, I'm not sure if this is maybe just a hunch or if this is more of a want, but I think speeding the game up and actually keeping the ball in play and applying pressure that sense, as opposed to allowing defenses to get set, might be the next evolution. So I don't think it's going to be around for a huge amount of time. I think I'm not sure if it's going to go away completely this season, but yeah, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think there are teams that are really good at it. You know, I look at Brentford, sure, and they've got Coyote, who can fling the ball under the fucking crossbar, basically. That I understand. Like, if you've got somebody who's got that natural ability, I understand the decision to exploit that. What I don't 100% understand is Arsenal's embrace, if that's the right way of putting it, of this particular tactic, because we don't really have anybody who's got a good long throw. I think Calafiori's is sort of mid-range. It's okay. Declan Rice, again, sort of mid-range. You're getting it maybe just towards the front post. So you're looking for that flick on or whatever. But I've seen us do it with all due respect to Miles Lewis-Skelly, does not have a long throw. It goes up in the air, and for a defender, if you're the defending team, meet and drink, because the longer the ball is in the air, the easier it is for you, to time it, to time your jump and to clear your lines. But we persist with it. So I'm not 100% sure why. Is it about condensing the game? Is it about ensuring that all the opposition players are in a specific area, which then leaves you with a lot more room elsewhere when that ball breaks? So you're looking for the second ball more than perhaps the long throw itself to be effective. But I see where you're coming from as well, that if teams start setting up for long throws all the time, then there is a load of room to throw the ball and keep possession. Whereas I think over the last number of years, what's been interesting is, and people have talked about our throw-ins all the time, right? Why do we take so long to take a throw-in? Well, it's because you want to keep the ball, right?
Yeah.
And teams are now way more organized. There is I don't know if there's a word or whatever, but as soon as the opposition get a throw, every player on the opposition team or every player on the team knows where they're supposed to be. So you've got to mark the man. It becomes increasingly difficult to keep possession from a throw-in, right?
Yeah.
So I do wonder if the long throw is, in some ways, a means to an end.
It's an evolution because of that specific thing. And
yes,
then,
exactly.
Therefore, it will come back out the other way.
It's a reaction.
At some point.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought about, and I did wonder about this, I was going to ask you, was the focus on set pieces, not just long throws, but corners, free kicks, which have always been a fundamental part of the game. I did wonder if, in part, the schedule and the physical demands on players have contributed to the increased focus on these things because, how do I put this? It gives you a chance to sort of reset, take a little bit of a breather, if you like. Okay, we're getting ready for our long throw. We're getting ready for our corner. We take a while to take our corners. It could be because we're doing signals, but it also is a way of preserving energy to a certain extent. And when the schedule is the way it is with the internationals and Europe and cup competitions and the Premier League and, situations like we're facing with Crystal Palace, where they're having to play like 4 games in 8 days, nonsense like this. I did wonder if, whether it's deliberate or subconscious or something, that a way of not exerting or overexerting your players in every minute of every single game has led to this sort of focus on set pieces.
Yeah, potentially. I also think it's pound for pound one of the most effective things that you can train, because it's, if you build out a playbook, to use a kind of like an American sportism, that pretty much everyone in the squad knows, that can become interchangeable, especially when you don't have a huge amount of time on the training ground. With a lot of new signings coming in as well, and I know it's not like Arsenal all of a sudden embraced set pieces this season. It's been something that's been around for a while, but players like Hincapié, Mosquera can learn certain rhythms or routines that Arsenal can implement and control, which I think is a major word, because that's what Arteta loves, right? It's the control aspect. He just wants to control as much of the game as possible. That is a lot easier to teach when you only have one midweek session, because you've got an away game in Europe and another Premier League game, and you've got travel and rest and stuff like that, as opposed to, hey guys, we need to do these triangles here, and then this is the trigger and everyone has to do it, So I do wonder if that's an aspect of it as well, because it's not just been an Arsenal thing. It's been a thing that a lot of teams have started to focus on as well. And
it's sort of mad, isn't it, when Mikel Arteta says, "I want Arsenal to be the best at everything," and he said that out loud, and everyone's like, "Whoa, you want to be the best at everything? What the fuck?" And then it's like,
hate that thinking.
No, I don't hate that thinking either. I think that's logical.
Yeah.
I think if you are a football manager, you want your team to be the best at everything within its own capability, right? Are Burnley or, a newly promoted team going to be the best at free-flowing, attacking, dominant football playing in the opposition half? No. But are there things that they can, maximize? But that kind of thinking applies to all aspects of the game. So I also think that sort of focus on set pieces is, because we've actually got that sort of mindset. B, we've got 2 players in Bukayo Saka and Declan Rice in particular who produce the sort of consistent set piece delivery that few players really can.
Yeah.
It was David Beckham famously was brilliant at corners for Manchester United because he spent hours and hours and hours practicing those. But how many times did you see, or have you seen, in all the time you're watching football, whether it's Premier League or the Bundesliga or whatever, crap corner after crap corner after crap defender. Corner? Yeah. Oh, look, another one where they didn't get it past the first man at the front post, etc., etc. That is a common theme to set pieces, and we have 2 players who can absolutely buck that trend. Yeah. And also, we have got some very, very good players who are kind of mental in their pursuit of getting their head on the ball in the opposition box. I mean, Gabriel is brilliant, but even Mikel Merino the other day, whatever you think about that Dan Ballard challenge, he was putting his head in a position where he might get the ball, he might get an elbow if Dan Ballard protects himself, he might smash his head into Dan Ballard's head, but he's willing to put his head in those positions, and I don't think every player is. And we've got quite a few of those.
It's like Tom Sizemore in Heat. It's like the action is the juice. And it's just like, that's maybe why, but maybe it's just like, just keep set pieces going. I think with the Arteta, I want to be the best. I want us to be the best at everything thing. That was, that reminded me a little bit of when Arsene Wenger did the whole, like, I want to win the league unbeaten thing. And
you don't say it out loud.
Yeah, but I think that and this is I don't really kind of fall into the like, hey, everyone hates us kind of thing. And because Stadio is not an Arsenal podcast, we're neutral essentially, even though we have our fandom, etc. And, we have to be objective. But I do think that one trait that has been quite common over the last, I think we're probably going into the third year of this. I'd say the first year that Arsenal were back in the Champions League, I think there was an argument to be made that even though Arsenal were maybe not the best team in Europe, I think they were the most rounded in Europe. Even then, actually. I looked at, for example, I still believe that if Arsenal play the Bayern side that were on the pitch and not the badge, Arsenal get through that tie in that Champions League. And I think that going back a decade or so, there were so many, or not maybe so many, but there were clearly identifiable weaknesses in Arsenal sides, even going back to the ones that were fairly successful before the trophy drought. And I think what Arteta has done now is he has built a side over the last few years that can beat literally any team depending on what they want to do stylistically. A common thing with Arsenal was that you could just bully them and then that would be it. You can't really do that anymore because they're a bunch of absolute units. Technically, they can hang with the best technical teams in the world, really. I think the only side that has technically, but bar maybe Manchester City over the last few years, I think was the PSG semi-final last season. And that's because Arsenal were threadbare. They were knackered and they were threadbare. They had no players left. And if Arsenal want to build deep and maintain possession, they can do that against low blocks. If you want to run a high line against Arsenal, this Arsenal side can torch you on the break. So I think that Arteta isn't, while Arsenal might not be perfect at everything, I don't think there are many, if any, sides in Europe that can tick as many boxes as this Arsenal side can now. And to be honest, I mean, there's the how many points everyone's got in the league over the last 3 seasons. That is a sign of consistency from this Arsenal side that I don't think gets enough credit because that is very, very difficult to do. It will change when you get over the line and win one of those big trophies, which is obviously something we all need to do. But I think sometimes, and I know that some Arsenal fans get bored of me for saying this, but I think it's easy to forget, like 5-6 years ago, we were a million miles away from this. Like so far. So I always kind of lean a little bit more into the appreciation side of it, even if I'm not wild about some of the, like for example, the long throw thing, bringing it back. Yeah, it's fine because that's just another way that Arsenal can, in theory, gain an advantage. But, I don't love it.
Okay. All right. Here is one which I'm sure will elicit an opinion from you. Brian says, Eberechi Eze is a vanity buy and under-delivering.
Strongly disagree. I think he's been brilliant since he's joined, actually. I think he's given us, kind of leading on from the last answer, I think he's given us another element to our attack. I think there were clearly moments that you can see, okay, this is a very different setup to the one I was playing in before, and this is a different set of responsibilities. And also, footballers are human beings. This is a guy who signed for his boyhood club and it has been probably the most popular signing that Arsenal have made since, like, in terms of how wild the celebrations were, Ozil, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
Like, because that was just felt like so out of the blue. This felt more joyous and, like a homecoming.
Sure.
So I think there's definitely an element of that played into it. I can imagine he was so nervous for the first few games. I think it was a little bit unfortunate for him, maybe, that he scored his first home goal against Palace, because it wasn't even like he could really celebrate it that wildly. But no, I don't think it was a vanity buy at all. I think that maybe the age profile, some people can be like, oh, well, is it worth the money for that? I think that's just a premium. That's a Premier League premium, and it's an English player premium as well. I love the sign-in. I'm really, really glad he plays for Arsenal and not anyone else. And
especially where that anyone else would have been if it weren't Arsenal. And listen, I also strongly disagree with this. If you look at, people will judge forward players by their assists and by their goals, and that's completely normal. I think, over the last number of weeks, again, I think I said this to James on Monday, at one point in the Sunderland game, Eze had the ball and he was just sort of drifting across field, and I was like, this is great. We don't have Martin Odegaard, but look who we have. And that's no disrespect to Ethan Nwaneri, who I think is a fantastic talent. Look at the shots in the Premier League this season. What is one of the big accusations at Arsenal over the last number of years? We're a shot-shy team. We needed to address that. The most shots taken in the Premier League this season, top 3, all of them on 19, Victor Gyökeres, Eberechi Eze, and Ricardo Calafiori. That tells you some of the impact that he's having. Even if those shots are not turning into goals, it's about what it means for the opposition, how you deal with it, where you make them play, etc., etc. I think there's more to come from Eze in terms of end product. I can understand why people might be or might have been expecting a little bit more from him, but I strongly, strongly disagree that it's a vanity buy, or that he's under-delivering, although, as I said, I think there is more to come. Yeah,
I agree. I think once his feet are fully under the table as well, and he feels like he may be less overawed by the occasion. If that sounds like I'm being disrespectful, I don't. But like I was saying before, but I think it's it was such a big deal for him to sign for Arsenal, and I think he's looked great. I think that once he, maybe takes control a little bit more of the team, because I still think he's like the players who have been here for a lot longer and more senior players. I think you'll see a real, maybe like upturn in the more wow moments. I think he's doing a lot of really, really sensible stuff and a lot of very important stuff, especially for the attack. But I'm glad he's with us.
For sure. Okay, what about this one? I just mentioned him there. This one comes from Kerrick. And they say the way Arteta is handling Nwaneri and Miles Lewis-Skelly is actually very smart management from both footballing and human perspectives. Having them playing bit part roles after signing new deals is a way of testing their character.
Can I do an agree and disagree? That's not really the thing of statements, is it? But I agree with some of that and I disagree with some of that.
Okay, well, break it down to its component parts then.
I agree that it's quite smart management, but I disagree with the reasons why. I agree that I think, for example, the second season after a breakout season for teenage players can be extremely difficult. Because they emerge as this unknown talent. There is only upside because you don't expect them to be there. For example, Miles last season, it was like, oh my God, this kid's amazing. Oh my God, this kid's doing stuff that we would never have thought an 18-year-old could do on a football pitch in the Bernabeu, for example. However, that can be very, very hard to maintain at that age. And there is a thing called the rookie wall, right? Where rookie, young players emerge on the scene and all of a sudden they plateau a little bit before taking that next leap. Because what can often happen is when things inevitably stop going so well, because there is that, then the expectation goes up and then the forgiveness levels go down once you've established yourself. I think it can be difficult for players to then continue that development as freely as they do when they first break out. Do I think that they both should have played more minutes this season? Yes. But and also, do I think that the pair of them will be really frustrated by the minutes that the lack of minutes? Also, yeah. But I think they're going to play a huge amount of football in the second half of the season, because there are going to be games where we're going to need them both, probably. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not necessarily sure it's because, right, we signed the deal with them now and then we can kind of...
Let's fuck them around and see how they respond.
I don't think it's that. I think it's a more of a developmental thing.
I sort of agree mostly with you there, because I do think you're right. You know, why was Lewis Skelly so effective? It was because nobody knew who he was, really. Nobody knew what he did or how he did it. And I think we saw at times last season, when people got a bit used to the way Miles played and the way he tried to protect the ball, he got caught out a couple of times. There was a red card, I think, in one of the games, not this stupid red card against Wolves, but there was another game where he got a red on just about halfway thereabouts. He made a foul, he got turned and made a foul, he got sent off. You know, I think that's something that the player has to learn, and the manager kind of has to protect them from as well. It's like, you're an unknown quantity. Therefore, when you pick up the ball, nobody quite knows what you're going to do. So that's really effective until such time as they figure you out. And then you have to figure out ways yourself to be a little more effective. I would say, whether it's deliberate, whether it's Arteta just deciding to make his squad as strong as it possibly can be, the sort of win now element of this season. Like, we could have gone into this season with Nwaneri as Martin Odegaard's direct deputy and Lewis Skelly as either first choice left back or the deputy to Ricardo Calafiori, who's done really, really well this season. And it's worth pointing out that, like, while they will be frustrated with their minutes, it's hard to argue with the results that Mikel Arteta has produced with the players that he has picked, right? But instead, what we've got is Eberechi Eze, who's a more experienced option for Martin Odegaard, and that has a consequence for Nwaneri. And what we have is Piero Hincapié, who we don't quite know what this pecking order is yet. And I think some of the minutes he got of late were about getting minutes into his legs rather than saying, okay, he's now second choice to Calafiori. I think it was more about, okay, we've got to give this guy minutes and get embedded in and integrated and all those kinds of things. But we have a 3-2 kind of situation at left back, and that's unsustainable a bit. But those were very conscious decisions to bring in those players, to bring in Eze, to bring in Hincapié, who won the Bundesliga with Bayer Leverkusen, add that bit of experience, albeit he's not that much older than Miles. I think he's still only 23, something like that. But those were very conscious decisions to bolster the squad, to sort of increase our chances of winning this season, without having to, and I mean this in the most respectful way possible, carry two teenagers. That sounds wrong, but do you know what I mean by that? Where you're putting a lot of responsibility on an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old in a season where everybody is saying, if Arsenal don't win the title, it's a disaster, right? Which it might be or it might not be, whatever way you think about that. But I also think in doing that, there is inherently a test of their character, where they see a player come into their position. How do you respond? Do you train harder? Do you work harder? Do you increase, develop other parts of your game? You know, the things that the coaching staff have been telling you to work on, do you work on them even harder? I think it is a good way for Mikel Arteta to see what the response is like from them. Because, you know, the other side of it is like, they have demonstrated enough quality and character to make that breakthrough last season. Was the door open a little bit because of the injuries? Absolutely. But they still had to come in and perform, and Nwaneri nearly got double figures in goals in his debut season, which is incredible. And Lewis Skelly one of our standout players last season. So, I don't think there's a situation where these guys are being just, right, okay, let's fuck them around. But as a consequence of trying to build a really, really big, deep winning squad, they're going to be tested.
Yeah, I think the one for me that I'm weirdly a little bit more concerned about Ethan than Miles, because I think even though you could look at and say that Miles has more traffic in front of him from a pathway point of view, with Calafiori at left back, the signing of Hincapié, and also Christian Norgard in midfield, which I think is a position that Miles could play in. He is essentially a midfielder to me. I see him as a central midfielder who plays left back. When he plays, he offers very different things to what Riccardo Calafiori and Piero Hincapié do. So I think for Ethan, that to me seems like a rhythm thing. Like, for example, I could imagine him going to a Bundesliga side on loan for half a season, playing every single game, every single minute, pretty much, getting a load of goals, getting a load of assists, getting that rhythm in there. Because it feels like, was it the season before last where he was playing quite a lot of the year towards the end of the year? Or not? Was that right?
No, it would have been. It was last season, really.
Season.
Yeah. But he didn't play a lot towards the end of the season. He sort of came out of the team and didn't.
Yeah,
play.
that's it. So there was a period. So was it the middle of the or so where he was playing quite a lot for the Saka injury?
Yeah.
God, these last 2 or 3 seasons are just all.
I know, melt your brain, wouldn't it?
I know. So I think he's a little bit more in need of that rhythm again, where he knows that he's not just going to come out of the side. I think there will be games this season, and I hope it's not because of injury, but I think it might be because of injury, where Miles gets a run in the team, but also depending on the opposition, Miles will start. And we've seen it a couple of times already, but I think he will start a little bit more frequently because he has such a. I think this is where we're very blessed, but also it gets a little bit tricky that we have 3 left backs with 3 very different skill sets that could all be used depending on the opposition. But I can understand it's also very frustrating for them, but I think that they are both good enough to establish themselves as Arsenal first team players eventually.
They're 18
they're
and 19.
Very, very young.
Yeah, exactly.
And also just one more thing. We constantly, I think recently, we talk about how much football these young players are playing. Like, if we want them to be able to play, especially someone like Miles, who I think his skill set, you could see him playing until however old he is. Like, let's not overburden these players, like physically or responsibility-wise, so soon.
All right, we'll do a few quick-ish ones to get us out of here because there's a couple of interesting ones. Rayman says Arsenal will only win the Premier League this season if Erling Haaland gets injured for a significant length of time.
Disagree. I mean, it would obviously probably help Arsenal's title ambitions, but I don't think it's going to be the sole deciding factor. No,
I agree. I think it would be very helpful, but the quality is there. You have to be able to deal with that quality. There was another one about whether we need a player, which I meant to take, but I haven't got, but whether we need a player like Haaland or Salah to score that level of goals to win the title. Does every team need that player, or is the sort of, the socialist outlook of Mikel Arteta sharing all the goals around, is that the way to do it?
I seem to remember when we had Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who, co-won the Golden Boot that year, and we weren't that close to the title, I don't think, by memory. So.
No. There might have been some other issues with that team beyond
potentially
Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, with all due respect to him. Speckled Jim, Martin Zubimendi will be as important to this team as Gilberto Silva was to the Invincibles.
Strongly agree.
You've been impressed?
I think he's the sign of the season, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. I think he's
our
so
signing
good.
of the season, or the
I think he's our signing of the season for sure. I think also the fact that the great thing about Martin Zubimendi was that it was done so far in advance that everyone kind of knew about it, that it essentially when it happened, it actually felt like a weirdly underwhelming signing because of everything else that was needed and because everything else that was going on in the transfer window. I think he is just such a massive upgrade on that part of the pitch for us. And if you look at the price that Arsenal paid for him, which is obviously a lot of money, but I think in terms of value for money, I think he's been just, incredible. Like, genuinely incredible. I think he's great. No,
I agree. I think he could well fill that role. I think there are a lot of players who get compared to players in the Invincibles. I just think Zubimendi was always a great signing. There's a reason City wanted him and Liverpool wanted him and Real Madrid wanted him. Like you say, did feel underwhelming because of the amount of time it took, but I think he's been absolutely great. What about this one? Toshi says, if Liverpool miss the Champions League after signing Alexander Isak and Florian Wirtz for that kind of money, it could financially break the club's backbone.
I don't have enough information to do a strongly agree, disagree, or whatever on that.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I imagine I'd say strongly disagree, because I think that the reason they were able to spend that much money was almost like the
billionaire owners.
Yeah, but also I think the way that they sold and spent over the last few years. So I think they can afford it. I also think that Liverpool will probably finish top 4 or 5, which will probably get you in the Champions League.
Yeah, so I can't see them finishing outside of that. Mick7071 says, the interfering/not interfering with play rule should be scrapped, and it should go back to simply being onside or offside any player anywhere on the pitch.
Strongly disagree, because if any player is offside at any point, does that mean any player getting the ball or any player not getting the ball? So
interfering with player or not,
No, I think we got enough problems to then.
Some guy standing 40 yards away in an offside position, all of a sudden you have a great goal ruled out.
Some guy's gone down because he's pulled his hamstring on the edge of the opposition box. And then Arsenal are in the Champions League semi-final and they break to win the game and they get called offside because said player is technically in an offside position. I think that statement might get revisited.
Yeah.
But also I think that there's just... I assume this is because of the Liverpool disallowed goal from the other day, but I personally thought that was a goal. And I think a lot of people could, I think when you slow anything down like that, it's just another example of how I think that the technology is really, really useful. It's just how that's being applied, which, slow anything down, it looks
terrible. Yeah, it can do. Kalle Dahlqvist says, eventually Manchester City will have to answer for each one of the 115 charges levelled against them.
I don't know what that means.
Well, I guess the sort of wider point is that Manchester City will be found guilty or wanting on some of those 115 charges, or do you think this, after years of waiting and all the speculation about how a decision, it's close, we're going to find out, will be the dampest squib of all time when it comes to the way this investigation plays out?
Responding to the statement then, I'd probably have to say disagree, because I imagine it will end up being some kind of like fairly kind of inconsequential points deduction and a fine. I think. I don't think we're going to get any, if for example, if Manchester City are relegated and the findings are that severe and the punishment is that severe, I would be really surprised. And while obviously Arsenal fandom hat is like, oh my God, yeah, this is great, I think from a wider football perspective, it then creates quite. This is maybe one for another show, but it creates a real problem for the Premier League. I mean, it is already a real problem for the Premier League, but it creates even more issues for the Premier League that I'm not entirely sure the Premier League could fully recover from, if that makes sense. It's quite a big... This is definitely one for not a statement podcast and for another time, but I think it's a really big deal that, like, it's the biggest thing that has dominated the Premier League for a long, long time in terms of... And its impact...
Yeah, do they undermine their own product or do they uphold their own rules, which appear to be fluid and flexible depending on who transgresses those particular rules, you know? Yeah. I mean, the thing to say, I suppose, is that I don't hold out at this point a great deal of hope that there's going to be anything seismic from this. You know, I think it will be at best a small points deduction. The only thing that I would say is that I don't think in the context of this season, you could say that that would be inconsequential from our perspective as a team that is challenging Manchester City for the title. So it might be a pretty consequential points deduction, even if it is 6 points or 9 points, whatever it might be. That could be the cushion that Arsenal need, which, by the way, I would happily take, and it would not provide any kind of asterisk on the league season. If we were to go on and win it, people would be going, well, you only won because, City got deducted points. Well, that's their fault, not our fault, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not too confident, though, that there'll be much in this. I think I've got two more just to get us out of here. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, I thought this was quite an interesting one. Bedlam ham. Anyway, that's just conjured up all kinds of images of hams fighting on a battlefield for me. He says, by the end of the season, we'll be talking about Gabriel Heinze as one of the most important signings this year.
Disagree, I think. I think he's been a great addition. I'm not sure we're fully aware of the goings on enough to definitively say that's the guy.
He's the difference maker. Yeah,
Zubimendi, Gyökeres, Eze, but hang on a minute, the real ones know.
It's that guy over there in the tracksuit. It's the tracksuit guy over there. I think there is at times a tendency to over-index the impact of particular coaching staff. You know, I remember, and this is not a disrespect in any way to Martin Keown, but everyone's saying, well, the reason Arsenal had that brilliant defensive run in the 2006 Champions League was because Martin Keown came back and was doing a little bit of coaching with the team at that time. Like, I think if that was the impact of Martin Keown's coaching on, what was a very makeshift back four, chances are that when we got all our good players back, he would have been kept on to make them even better. I don't know.
Never going to concede a goal.
Yeah, we'll never concede a goal again. Arteta would be playing catch up this season to the most parsimonious Arsenal defence of all time. I do think there is, a bit of an edge to Heinze, which might be useful. You know, I thought it was Mosquera a couple of weeks ago making the doing an interview, and he was talking about we're working hard together. And Gabriel Heinze, of course, is there, and he says, of course he's Argentinian, so we're learning a lot. I'm paraphrasing here, so maybe there's something about the dark arts of defending, particularly for young players like Mosquera, where someone like him could be very, very handy.
I did find it funny when Arsenal played Atleti and they cut to Nelson Vivas on the Atleti bench, and I was like, that's the next evolution.
Listen, I've had enough Nelson Vivas in my life. I don't need no more. Sorry, Nelson, but
a little reminder that man wore number 7 for Arsenal.
Fun times. Just don't talk to me about Leeds. Final one, Matt McGrath. Arsenal solely base their signings on their modelling potential to sell more merchandise. Strongly agree.
Well, I mean, do you know what? A lot of people said that those signings were made because of the squad depth issues, I think the squad depth also extends to the amount of merch drops there are, and we need to rotate heavily throughout the season for all of those merch drops. So maybe.
Yeah. The final Thursday of every month, coincidentally, there's a new drop of Adidas/Arsenal merchandise.
Nothing strikes more fear within me than a new merch drop, because usually it is to counterbalance a poor result. It's like, hey, here's some brilliant, beautiful Adidas original stuff to take your mind off it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm happy, and now I'm broke. Take my money. Thanks.
I don't think they're that cynical. I think it does take a little more planning to sort of create and launch merchandise. And, oh shit, we lost to Derby. We better get some nice fucking Bruce Banana stuff out there.
Do you know what's really great at the moment? There was a bit of a Stadio bit a few years ago that I used to do every time Arsenal lost. I used to just retweet or requote the result from the club, and just say, well, at least the kits are nice, you know. Whereas the thing is now, Arsenal are really good and the kits are nice.
Yeah.
So
you're living the dream here, man.
I am, man. I am.
All right.
Chatting to you, talking about kits and statements.
What could be better? Right. we better leave it there. Ryan, as ever, a pleasure. Thank you for being with us.
Great to chat to you, mate. Take care.
Thank you very much indeed to Ryan. You can find him on Blue Sky. He is at ryanhunn.bsky.social, at ryanhunn.bsky.social. And of course, he is the co-host of the Stadio podcast, which is available now on all the usual podcast platforms and comes highly recommended for me if you're looking for something a little different from your usual general football podcast. So give it a try if you haven't already. Right. I'm going to leave it there for now. Thank you so much as always for being with us. Remember, if you do like the podcast, you can give us a review in your favorite podcast app, whether that's Apple or Pocket Cast. I think most podcast apps now have a review feature. So if you want to give us a review, it does help get us up the thing, you know, what do you call it? Like the list of podcasts, except in an order. The charts. That's what it is. Well done, Brain. You did good eventually. But you don't have to do that, of course. Just being here, downloading, listening, subscribing. That's all we could ever ask. Apart from all the other stuff I've asked from you in this podcast, like voting and reviews. But apart from that, there's nothing more I can ask of you. So you can join myself and James on Monday for an Interlull Arsecast Extra. In the meantime, look after yourselves, look after each other, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye.